Hello, everyone. This is Randy Ewart of CT Sped Math Dude. I want to talk to you in this video about performance factors and how that can affect a student's ability to perform perform a given task or skill, whether it's academic or non-academic. Now, I'm a math person, so I'll focus on math, but you can generalize that to other areas. So let's take a look. So to explain performance versus ability, let's use an analogy of a car. So this car has the ability to be a really nice ride, but if it has a flat tire, its performance is going to be severely impacted. Well, the same thing can happen with our students. They may have the ability to perform some skill or task or to do some academic work, but there are performance factors that get in the way. So student can have ability, but not perform up to their ability. So let's characterize the performance factors into three broad categories. The main one is the obvious one, and your student has a disability. So that obviously impacts performance. Also, a student has gaps from the past. So when they're moving through curriculum or new tasks that build on previous tasks or skills that build on previous skills, that's going to affect their ability or performance. But the one that's often overlooked, that we recognize, we acknowledge, but we don't connect the dots as well, is some what we call secondary characteristics. So this is the area that I think that we can mine to get a lot more progress. So let's take a look at this. Secondary characteristics are characteristics that arise in the student. And by characteristics, I mean a set of characteristics that result in performance levels, whether it's high or low. So secondary characteristics arise not directly from the disability, but from how the disability interacts with the environment. So I work with a lot of students with math anxiety. Math anxiety is not a direct product of dysgraphia or a specific learning disability. What happens is the student with dysgraphia or a specific learning disability interacts with the math, becomes anxious because they cannot do it. Maybe it's at school or in a certain classroom or with a certain topic like fractions, and then the math anxiety kicks in. And that math anxiety is developed over time. It didn't occur with the disability, but it occurred eventually, hence the term secondary. That's an area that we could really get some mileage with. And that's often the place that I focus on early on in the process when I'm helping students. I want to unpack this a little bit more. The ideal learning occurs in what Vygotsky, a educational psychologist, coined as the zone of proximal development. So here's what we mean by the zone of proximal development. So early on, think of learning as a spectrum, and there's three areas of that spectrum, or scale, I should say. Well, the first one is the easy level. And that's when a task or skill is so easy, the student can perform without any effort. And so when they're doing that, they're not really learning. But that's often where education exists. We want the kids to have immediate success. And so we may water down the task demand until it's so easy for them that they can do it. And then we go, hooray, you did it. What we want, but then on the other end of the spectrum, is you have a task that is so challenging and so frustrating that they don't learn anything from it. So we want to avoid that. So we don't want to live here. We don't want to live here. So what we want is to live here in the zone of proximal development. And that's where the student has some struggle, but not enough that they become overly frustrated. A little bit of frustration is part of the deal. That happens. And we tend to want to avoid that, go, oh, no, we don't want to upset them. Now, the level of struggle and frustration varies from student to student, but you got to find that sweet spot where the students may be a little bit frustrated, but they can still push forward. And that's a trick that I really spend a lot of time on. So you see in the picture here, the student wears swimmies. These swimmies would be like a scaffold. We can provide different types of scaffolding to enable the student to perform a task with some struggle that they otherwise would not be able to perform. So that's where we want to live. So now let's talk about, well, how can then we provide, create the environment that allows the student to work at that sweet spot where there's a little bit of struggle, enough where they're learning and progressing, but not one that overwhelms them. So let's take a look. So we have these secondary characteristics, these behaviors that like math anxiety that we want to address. Well, what you can do is you can try to shape replacement behaviors, kind of shape them out of those undesired behaviors and into some more desired behaviors. So let's talk about what shaping is. So shaping comes from a psychologist in the early 1900s, Skinner, who had a famous activity, maybe experiment that he conducted with a pigeon. And the deal was the pigeon was put in this box. It was called the Skinner box. And the pigeon, if the pigeon happened to peck anywhere on this metal plate, a food pellet would come out of the little hole down here. And pretty soon, the pigeon started realizing, if I peck on this wall, I get something tasty. And so the pigeon would then start pecking on the wall even more and more. So then the experimenters changed the parameters of the game. So then it was maybe the pigeon had to peck at the top half of the wall, and then he would get a pellet. If he pecked at the bottom half, no pellet. And the pigeon learned, oh, I'm going to peck at the top half. And then what would happen is you would narrow the goal, the reward area, closer and closer to this little plate that's right there where he's actually pecking now. And soon enough, the pigeon learned I had to peck on that one spot in order to get a pellet. That's shaping. We can do that with students. And in fact, that's how my son, Gabriel, learned how to make eye contact. Now, he's severely impacted with autism. And so what the therapist did is they took something that he really likes, which is Legos at the time. And that they would do is they would take the Legos and they would hold it up and he would look at the Legos and he would get the Legos. So he was like, oh, if I look at the Legos, I get the Legos. I like that. And what they would do is move the Legos closer and closer to their eyes. And then he would look at it and he'd get the Legos. Well, eventually he was looking at the Legos so close to their eyes, he would make incidental eye contact. As soon as he made incidental eye contact, boom, he got the Legos. That's like the pigeon pecking at that one little plate. He realized, oh, if I look at these white things in someone's head there, I get my Legos. And so he started making eye contact. So that's an example of how we can shape behavior to move students towards a desire, moves students to a place where they can learn better. We can do that to undermine these performance factors related to secondary characteristics and help the student then be more productive. If we can take away that, let's call it, and I came up with a number, 30%, if we can get rid of a lot of that 30%, that's a factor, then you're going to see your student increase their ability, and that makes their time with a teacher and with instruction and with a therapist more productive, and then that speeds up their learning. Another way of addressing that would be in hand with the shaping would be something like a token board. What I like to do is I like to give the students tokens related to something that they enjoy. So I had one student that really liked Scooby. And so what this student would do is he would write numbers, but he would draw dots at the ends of each numbers. And so that took time and that took away his attention on actually doing the math. So if he completed his work, he got a snack or a token, eventually led to a snack, or actually, my bad, he actually would earn computer time. But if he completed the work with no dots on the numbers, he would get 2 tokens. So instead of 1 token. So if he did the work but drew numbers, he would just get 1 token. And then at the end, based on how many tokens he earned, that would equate to how much time he got. So we were shaping out, we were extinguishing his undesired behavior. So in summary, there are different factors affecting students' performance. And there's performance and then there's ability. If you want your students to be performing closer to their ability level, then one of the areas that we can focus on are these secondary characteristics. And the way to address that would be shaping and perhaps using something like a token board and move them slowly in that direction. But the idea is we need the team to be mindful of this and to focus on this. Again, this is an area that's often overlooked. The focus tends to be on the disability itself, which obviously is important, and the gaps, which is also important, but then these secondary characteristics are also a major factor. So I wish you well in working with your students' secondary characteristics.